Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Common Sense View. According to CNN, U.S. and China agreed to drastically roll back tariffs, a major trade breakthrough.
And the breaking news this morning, a major breakthrough in the trade war between the United States and China. The two sides making a surprise announcement after a weekend of talks in Switzerland under the agreement unveiled by the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. For 90 days, the U.S. is going to cut its tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% down to 30%. And China will cut its levies on U.S. imports from 125% to 10%.
That's important. After what seemed to have been a protracted war, even though it has been a short period, they now agree to roll back the tariff on both countries. You might presume that this would be a welcome news for Americans. Unfortunately, some parts are giggling or really happy that it wasn't a full-blown removal of tariffs, whereas the other side believe that it is the right step in the right direction. I read what Swalwell was writing this morning, that he caved in. He caved in. It doesn't really matter whether he caved in or not. It's deal making. You cannot get every single thing you wanted. And you are lucky if you get majority of what you wanted, which is the case here. Now let's take the news. The United States and China agreed Monday to drastically roll back tariffs on each other's goods for an initial 90-day period in a surprising breakthrough that has de-escalated a punishing trade war and buoyed global markets. Why is this important? It's important because these two countries, whether you like it or not, are the major superpowers in global goods and service production. And when they agree to do business together, it's very, very good for the world, because the fight will loosen the grip on the Chinese people who literally control the supply chain of the world, so that they will freely manufacture, because US is their major market. If they can freely sell in there, they can also have excess to sell to other parts of the world who are also consumers of their goods. And also the American people, this will also ease their own problem of buying in for a very heightened price. Now, the announcement, which was made in a joint statement, comes after a weekend of marathon trade negotiation in Geneva, Switzerland, by officials from the world's two largest economies, during which both sides touted substantial progress.
We know that some of the details of what happened, Mr. Secretary, but can you recount to us some of the color, how it came together? You mentioned that the venue and the equanimity. Was it cordial and conciliatory right from the outset, or would you characterize it as tough negotiating most of the way?
Joe, I would characterize it very much as President Trump, the equivalent of President Trump's relationship with Party Chairman Xi. They have a good relationship, but they both advocate strongly for their respective countries, for their respective citizens. So it was always respectful. We have the two largest economies in the world. We were firm and we moved forward. We tried to identify shared interest. We came with a list of problems that we were trying to solve, and I think we did a good job on that. And again, this is a 90-day pause. For our tariff program, we had a plan, we had a process, and now what we have with the Chinese is a mechanism to avoid an upward tariff pressure like we did last time. So this is a 90-day pause.
Both sides recognize the importance of a sustainable, long-term, and mutually beneficial economy and trade relationship, they said in a statement. It's obvious. It's obvious because when China and US are in good shape economically, the world is in good shape economically, because US dollar is more or less the world accepted trade currency. And China is more or less the largest production country in the world. Whether we accept it or not, they are. Global investors are cheering a toll in the trade war sparked by U.S. President Donald Trump's massive tariffs, which have rolled financial markets, disrupted supply chains, and stoked recession fear. Now, the problem here is, they said, is the trade war was sparked by Donald Trump trade tariffs. What is the truth in this particular statement? The truth is that I can understand the sentiment there. Somebody is looking after his own people. And it's also acceptable that you look after your own people. He said there is completely one-sided trade mishandling for all over the world against US. Who am I to decide? He said his country is being tariffed to hell, whereas other goods coming into his country are more or less non-tariffed. So to make it balanced, fair and balanced, you tax us 100%, you tariff us 100%, we tariff you 100%. You tariff us 10%, we tariff you 10%. So let's start on zero tariff for each country. I know that this might destabilize the world order, the world trade order, but on its face value, it's the right thing to do. Even if you're not taking it 0 to 0, you can make a balanced trade agreement. Not whereby a country like India has 150% tariff on, or almost that, in American auto, and there's less than 20 in their own auto coming to US. Dow futures jumped more than 2%, while S&P 500 futures rose nearly 3%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite futures went up more than 3.5 during Asian afternoon trading. Asian markets were higher too, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index ending about 3% higher.
The agreement between the U.S. and China, of course, having a ripple effect, as you just heard mentioned, around the world. The markets in Asia surging on the news. CNN's Mark Stewart joining us now from Beijing. I'm just curious about this because what you're hearing from one side here in the United States is that this was a major win, a major agreement, but there's a huge capitulation on the part of the United States here. How did this agreement come together so quickly?
Well, Sarah, I think a big part of it is just necessity, because look at the economic upheaval it's caused around the world. In the United States, there's been a lot of concern about supply chains. Here in China, manufacturing was beginning to take a hit. It doesn't look good when the world's first and second largest economies are fighting with each other. And then this door opened and both sides felt it was ripe for conversation. And as we have seen, markets really like what they are seeing. If we look at the big boards, if we look at the United States, at U.S. stock futures, we're seeing gains across the board, including the S&P 500. That's important because that's where so many of our retirement accounts are based upon. And then here in Asia, as you mentioned, big gains as well. We saw the Hang Seng in Hong Kong up by more than 3%. But with all of this so-called celebration, if you will, there is a lot of caution. China's being very measured in its response. It's seeing this very much as a first step. And that's reflected in some of the statements we are hearing from the country's leadership, including China's vice premier. Let's listen to some of his remarks from earlier in Geneva.
We're going to promote new development in the China-US trade and economic relations and inject more certainty and stability into the world economy.
Isn't that remarkable? 115% reduction in tariff for either side for 90 days. Now, that is act of the deal. It might continue, it might not. But if the people react positively to this and you remove it after 90 days, then they are going to write against the government. Because it's obvious that in the recent years, the government is doing their own will and not the will of the people. And with all this back and forth, if they cannot rule once for the will of the people, I think reimposing pen will get the people to rise. Isn't it worth celebrating? So I know for China, it might not be to their own advantage in one way because they had more tariff on US than US had on them. But the good side of it is that more goods will be sold from China to US, which brings up more revenue. And also more goods will pass from US to China, which opens up the market for the people to have access to other geopolitical zones, especially the things they will want to buy. I think it makes sense. Under the agreement, China will also suspend or cancel its non-tariff continued countermeasures imposed on the US since April 2nd as part of its retaliatory measures against the US. Beijing had imposed export restrictions on some rare earth minerals, placed dozens of American firms on its unreliable entity list and export control list, and launched an anti-monopoly probe into US chemical giant DuPont. The trade war has already affected the US and Chinese economies. America's gross domestic product, GDP, the broadest measure of the US economy, showed its first quarterly contraction since early 2022. As importers raced to bring in goods before punishing tariff risk kicked in. As for China, its export to the U.S. fell sharply last month, impacting the country's enormous manufacturing industry. Chinese factory actively contracted at its fastest pace in 16 months in April, adding urgency to Beijing's effort to roll out fresh economic stimulus. Now, you see, in the real sense of it, this is a win-win for both sides. At least ease the political pressure from among the people, because a hungry mouth is an angry mouth. When the manufacturers are manufacturing and no person is buying, they are overstocking their storage. And what happens? There will be no more reason to manufacture more. And if you're not selling what you're manufacturing, what happens to your workers? Layoff starts. And when that starts in a country as big as China, you know that if there is an uproar, they can't resist it. They can't contain it. So the best thing for them to do is to lower down the tempo. And I wish the European counterparts will do exactly the same thing. Dan Ives, a managing director at Wedbush Securities in New York, said the agreement to suspend most tariffs on each other's goods was a best case scenario from the weekend talks. This is clearly just the start of a broader and more comprehensive renegotiations, and we would expect both these tariff numbers to move down markedly over the coming months as these talks progress, he wrote in a research note. It's a continuing discussion. The two sides also agreed to establish a mechanism to continue discussing about chemical, economic, and trade relations, led by Chinese Vice Premier He Li Feng and U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamison Greer, according to the joint statement. This discussion may be conducted alternately in China and the United States or a third country upon agreement of the parties as required. The two sides may conduct working level consultation on relevant economic and trade issues. Is that there? Speaking at the Monday press conference in Geneva, Boston said the consensus from both delegations is neither side wants to be decoupled, and what have occurred with these very high tariffs was an equivalent of an embargo, and neither side wants that. We do want trade. We want more balance in trade, and I think both sides are committed to achieving that. You see, that's a very remarkable thing. Beijing's upbeat and positive tone stands in stark contrast to its previous statement about the trade conflict with the U.S. For weeks, Chinese officials had projected a defiant position, demanding the U.S. remove all tariffs on China before agreeing to come to the negotiation table. The substantial, if temporary, breakthrough was unexpected just last week. Bessent sought to manage expectation by suggesting that his goal for the talks was the escalation of tension and not a big trade deal, as the U.S. China have been at a virtual stalemate since Trump imposed his tariff policy. Now, the issue here is it's obvious that the benefit of having this trade agreement is enormous, and to suggest otherwise is completely misguided. So, in as much as we may not accept the procedure, the process taken by Trump, anyone who is proud of his or her country, anyone who likes the success of his own country people, will come to the conclusion that I came to, that even though this is not the right way, he is looking out for his country. You might not like it, you might not appreciate it, but he is looking out for his country. So that is the latest in the developments regarding Trump's tariff as at yesterday. And you remember also last week that there was a trade agreement between US and the UK. So in any case, what the people in the left, the Democrats, thought was going to be a Herculean task to achieve is gradually dropping a big stone at a time. The UK, and now followed by China, which is a heavier one. There can't be more heavyweight coming. So if you think that putting this tariff was beneficial to Trump and to US, or if you think that it was misguided and irresponsible, let me know your opinion on the comment side. For me, I believe that he's looking out for his country. Whichever method he uses, maybe he thinks is what is going to benefit his country. And I believe that that the country I live in, and my home country should take the same measure in looking after our own people. Because what we have at the moment is not sustainable. And it's not sustainable. The wages remain the same, but the cost of things are going completely out of hand. If the tariff will help in that direction, especially this time around, and energy reduction, which also can be part of the business, then I think it will help everyone. So let me know what you think on the comment side. If you think that this is the right move in the right direction for Trump and the USA people and China and the world, let me know. But if you think that it's completely irresponsible and stupid for Trump to do it, also let me know. So on that note, thank you so much for listening. And if you have not subscribed on your way in, please do on your way out. And be hearing from you soon.